In this essay, I will explain how games use Roger Caillois' classification of game types through the example of Library of Ruina by Project Moon, which contains major elements of all categories. Library of Ruina is a rather unique combination of a visual novel with deck building and semi-turn-based combat, set inside a magical library inside of a dystopian city. As outlined in his book, Man, Play, and Games, Kawa believes that games can be considered in terms of four categories: agon, or competition, alea, or luck, earlinks, which is essentially a strong emotional response, and mimicry. Within these four categories, games can also be placed on a spectrum between paideia, which embodies freedom and an uncontrolled fantasy, and ludus, which is rule-bound and authoritative in its designs. Mimicry. The category of mimicry is based on acting as a character or to project oneself into a character in the game. Library of Ruina takes an almost reverse approach to mimicry. Battles in the game are referred to as stage plays, comprised of several acts, with each turn being a scene. By framing the life and death fights of the librarians, who are player-controlled, and guests to the library, who are computer-controlled enemies, as nothing more than a game, the player is distanced from the characters they command. While most games use mimicry to assist the player in empathizing with the characters of the game, Library of Ruina uses this reverse approach to intentionally distance the player from the brutality they command. This is done to align the player more easily with the brutal and uncaring ideologies harbored by most citizens of the game city, where nobody can afford to care about anyone else. Agon. According to Caillois, agon is the basis of competition and focuses on maintaining fairness between all parties to try to ensure that skill alone decides a victor. While Library of Ruina is a single-player game, the competition between player and computer can still be defined as agonistic. One of the game's most major ideas surrounding its battles is that of fairness, which is, in many ways, present. Both player and enemy operate under the same mechanics, attack simultaneously with each other, and even both have access to powerful special cards which can easily change the course of the battle. On top of this, almost every move and passive ability that an enemy can use, the player can also gain access to. Even story-wise, despite the librarians being resurrected after battle if they die, while guests die for good, the magic involved in the stage play causes the librarians to believe that they really are fighting for their lives while inside the battle, thus keeping the battle fair as far as anyone inside it is concerned. The highly agonistic nature of Library of Ruina forces the player to ever evolve their characters with the abilities of defeated foes in order to stand a chance as the game goes on. This again helps to push the player into the mindset of the people of the city, as you must take from the weak in order to stand a chance at defending yourself from those who are stronger. Alea. Alea refers simply to luck or chance-based parts of games. Aleatory systems play a large part in all of Library of Ruina's components, but they are most importantly seen in battles. In combat, the effectiveness of every action for both you and your enemy are determined by dice, which are rolled against each other in a clash. In general, the higher number wins. These aleatory mechanics are in a highly ludic form, as they are always present, and the rules of the game strictly define how they interact with each other and the player. The luck isn't entirely out of your control though. Different cards offer different risks. The player can choose between safe cards with shields, which, even if they lose the clash, will still block some damage, or go for a complete gamble on an extremely offensive card, such as Boundary of Death, which will result in its user dealing almost no damage and likely receiving a lot in return. Or pretty much just outright killing their opponent in a single blow. With, of course, many other cards of varying risk in between. As a result of the implementation of these aleatory mechanics, much of the strategy of the battle part of the game comes from determining what risks to take and where. The heavy presence of luck in the game can also be linked to the lives of the people in the city of the game. Some people are just lucky and born into wealth, while for others, a situation as horrible as their entire family being killed would often be dismissed as simply bad luck. E-links. The fourth category, E-links, is described by Caillois as something which creates a state of dizziness or disorder in the player, though it can be more aptly described as causing an intense emotional response. This includes things such as jump scares in horror games, or major character deaths in story-heavy games. Much of Library of Ruina is designed to elicit these kinds of emotional responses, particularly in conjunction with the other systems in the game, to generally produce a sense of dread and hopelessness as would be expected from living in a city such as the one in the game. For example, before each new fight, you do a visual novel section showing what was happening to the guests before they arrived in the library. While some guests do visit of their own volition, the majority are either ordered to or forced to do so in order to escape something horrible. Knowing that most of the people you fight don't deserve to die produces much of the hopelessness the game aims for. During the battle, both allies and enemies also have occasional dialogue, which aims to cause guilt and more dread from reminding you of their plight throughout the battle. It is worth noting, however, that some of the visual novel sections don't even need the context of the battles to produce a strong response in the player. Executions, exploitation, and body horror are common themes of these sections, often described in great detail, and are more than capable of standing as examples of E-link's design on their own, from the disgust and horror that they conjure in the player. The game absolutely does not hold back from disturbing content, and it is highly effective at making sure the player understands just how terrible the city it's set in is. Library of Ruina uses Agon, Alea, E-links, and mimicry design elements to create a uniquely dark and hopeless setting to immerse the player in, while pushing them to adopt the depressing mindsets of most citizens of it. While Roger Caillois did not come up with these categories with video games in mind, it is clear that they still strongly apply to them. Also, while Caillois used his categories to separate entire games from each other, for many games it is perhaps more appropriate to consider how categorized individual game systems and mechanics work together to produce the effect the game developers aim for.